Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Church Advance podcast. Couldn't be happier today to have one of my best buds with me, Kurt Skelly.
Come
Man,
on.
we just even started a conversation. We're just laughing before it even gets it even gets going. We're not even here to joke today, but it's just all kinds of funny stuff. Man, it's good to have you back, man. It's good to see you. I don't
Okay,
get
so listen, I want to just go on record because this episode is going to come out after the Super Bowl, but we're recording it before the Super Bowl. So I'm giving you an opportunity right now, Bryan,
yes,
to
sir.
give us the final score of the Super Bowl as a prophetic word.
Prophetic word from Bryan Sims. Yeah, I'm going to go 30-27 Kansas City because of how many one. It's going to be a one-score game for sure, and it's going to be Kansas City owns one-score games. I do see some high scoring here. I see Saquon scoring a few touchdowns, creating some havoc. But I do believe Kansas City will three-peat, and I believe it'll be relatively high scoring.
Okay, so that's your prediction, and
Yes,
I
sir.
want everyone to kind of weigh in. How close did you come? Here's my prediction. My prediction is I'm going to have some Doritos, I'm going to have some Coke Zero, and I'm going to hate the result no matter who wins because I can't stand either team.
Yeah. Well, here's the good news. You're going to be watching the game from the same place the Cowboys are. And so
True.
yeah, and man,
True.
I don't know, but the football, I question that coaching hire. I don't know what the deal is with the Cowboys.
No, yeah. Let's quickly get on something more spiritual.
Yeah, because this could go south real quick. Kurt, you and I have talked a lot. Just we talk a lot of ministry stuff, but one thing that has really caught my attention, I really want to share with the audience, is about pastoral succession.
Hmm.
And you are right now in the middle of, I think, one of the most unique, well done transitions from the outside, of course, that I've ever witnessed. And I think we all know historically this is where churches fail. W.A. Criswell, in his recent biography by O.S. Hawkins, had three regrets.
Hmm.
One was his family, one was the segregation issue in the
Hmm.
1950s, and the other was succession. And First Baptist Dallas never, well, for years and years and years, struggled after he left. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I've made this statement before, and I want to get into it with you because it's you and Josh and Faith Baptist Church have done such a great job. I want you to get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts and the story, a little bit about what you're doing, and then. But here's a great statement I taught in the book of Joshua when I teach Bible. There is no success without a successor,
Right.
and how we have really missed this mark for all kinds of reasons. But I really admire what you're doing, man. I mean, a guy like you could stay well into your 60s because of health and energy. But I love the fact that you seem to have put the health and future success of Faith Baptist Church above your own even plan. And so just kind of take it away from there. Tell us a little bit about what's
Sure.
happening at Faith Baptist and where you're at in the middle of this transition, where we're going.
Sure. No, first of all, I appreciate what you said. And it's interesting because almost every pastor I talk to will tell me, yeah, I don't want to stay too long. But then when it comes time to leave, to enter into that fourth quarter and be maybe more of a mentor, it's a difficult choice because there's a security in pastoring. There's an identity in pastoring. And when you lose that security, a paycheck, you lose that identity, I'm the pastor, who are you? So there's all of that. I'll say this at Faith, about a year and a half ago, I announced to our church, I said, listen, I believe that the Lord is leading me to resign from Faith Baptist Church in 3 years. And I wanted to give you the maximum off ramp that I could to make this transition as smooth. When people run relay races, there's a reason that there's a distance between the two runners. That's a baton passing distance. And I think sometimes in our ministry, we just kind of run our race and then drop the baton, hope someone picks it up. And then we wonder why we're losing the race, or we wonder why there's a different direction, or we wonder why, any number of things. So I said to our church, I said, listen, this church belongs to the Lord. We know that. But here's my recommendation. My recommendation is that when I have now offered this resignation, effective 3 years, I feel like as a church family, my advice to you would be consider your next pastor as being somebody who is already here. I said, he may not be. I said, but I would first of all recommend that you look internally first. We have a pastoral staff of 7 or 8 guys. Look internally first. And I said, and then choose somebody now so that we can work together. We can, and so that's what they did. So Josh Venable is our co-pastor right now, and I'll talk in a moment about what I mean by co-pastor, because sometimes people say, well, co-pastor means no pastor, and I'll tell you what I believe about that. But I recommended Josh. Our deacons invited me to be part of an advisory council for the pulpit committee. I said, I don't want to be on the pulpit committee. I want you guys, but would you advise us? Sure. And they also asked our founding pastor, which is really sweet, if he would be an advisor. And I'll tell you, I'm so proud of our guys because they took it seriously. They came up with a questionnaire. They came up with a scope and sequence, and they put Josh through the same kind of scrutiny, the same kinds of stipulations that you would ask a guy you don't even know. Statement of faith, questions about direction, about family, about philosophy, all of that. And they took 10 weeks, at the end of which they formally called Josh to be a candidate to be the next pastor of our church. And then I left that weekend on a mission trip. Our church family had a Q&A time with him. He preached as a candidate. They voted. And I tell you, it was so sweet. And the vote was this, that Pastor Josh Venable is voted in to be the next pastor of Faith Baptist Church, effective when Pastor Skelly leaves. And we put the date on there, which is June of 26. But the idea was, hey, if something happens to me, God forbid, or if I felt like I wanted to leave earlier, that he would automatically become the pastor at that point. So all of the emotion that churches naturally have when a pastor leaves now has been eliminated because I'm here. So there's really not, there's an emotional, oh, pastor, we don't want you to go, but I'm here. So it's not like I've gone. So we've removed all of those knee-jerk emotional decisions that people make in those moments. And quite honestly, you and I have both seen this, Bryan. People make some big mistakes when they're forced into those. They make decisions in the emotional moment. And when a pastor leaves,
who wants to go months without a pastor? You start getting desperate. You start clawing. And you said something so brilliant there that I just think is amazing. A shepherd led the sheep toward a shepherd. How many times does the guy just drop the ball and then sheep are scrambling around trying to figure out how to call the shepherd?
Correct.
And God assigns pastors. Churches don't. They recognize the assignment.
Right.
But I think how terrible is it to leave a bunch of men just completely unprepared, and then they start maybe not even looking for the right things. But I think the way you led them and then were there for them really is just a tremendous example of leadership. I hope you'll write a book about this. In fact, I've urged you in other matters. I hope you will write. But this would be a really, really good piece.
I appreciate that.
I think obviously, just a simple question. This obviously should. I think most people just know, could rattle off some answers. But why is this so important? Why is pastoral succession so important? I think I just mentioned one, and I'll let you take it from there. But one would be obviously the importance of leading people, leading the church as pastors are supposed to. What else comes to mind to you when you think of why is this so important to have a plan and execute it for the church?
Well, to use the baton illustration again, there should never be a time when someone's not running, and there should never be a time when the baton is not in somebody's hands. But what we've done is we've kind of created a scenario where there's a time when that no one's running. So you're just kind of standing still in this race and no one's holding the baton. And I would rather the baton be in the hands of 2 men for a short period of time to assure that the baton is always in somebody's hand. So let me come back to what I said about co-pastoring. So A co-pastor, in my view, a co-pastor is not the associate pastor. Joshua's our associate pastor, but here's the difference. And I liken it to a pilot and a co-pilot. So you fly quite often, Bryan, over the years, and a pilot is clearly the leader of that ship. But there's a co-pilot, and a co-pilot is vested with the information and authority to do anything that the pilot can do. Now, he's not the pilot, but in the absence of the pilot, he is the pilot. So a co-pastor is vested to do all the things that a pastor can do and should do. But when the pastor is there, he's still the pastor. So it's not like a two-headed monster. And here's how that works in real time. So in our ministry, when I'm gone preaching, and I'm gone a little bit more now, so that in this transition, Josh has more time to flex, more time to fit into his role. So for instance, last year I was gone 13 Sundays. Now I would never do that as a pastor, ever. For many, many years, my goal was don't miss more than 2, maybe 3 Sundays in a year. But because we're in this transitional time, he's getting a little bit more flex. I'm a little bit less visible. And when he's there, he's the pastor. We've done things like our church staff meetings. I don't lead them. He leads them. Now I'm there. I think there's a sense in which sometimes people look to me and say, okay, pastor, and I still speak into it. Right. But I feel like there are little things that one can do in these transitional times so that by the time I'm gone, I've been leaving. I'm not leaving is not an event. Leaving is a process. And I feel like that's what many pastors don't understand. And assuming leadership is not an event. Assuming leadership is a process too. So taking this time, this 3 years, has allowed that process to work for both of us at the same time.
Well, and that really leads right into this next. You see this pattern in Scripture. This is not, this is not new.
Right.
You see a lot more of it in the Old Testament fleshed out in narrative. For instance, 2 things come to mind right off the top of my head. You got Joshua and Moses, and you've got Elijah and Elisha, both of which, and I think the Joshua story is much more pronounced, it seems like. It's like there is a clear period of elevation.
Yep.
The Lord is elevating Joshua as he's serving.
Yep.
And then there's a clear statement from God to Moses, Joshua is the guy.
Yep.
And then when Moses dies, there's a clear, Joshua is clearly, I think it's Joshua 4. I even think it says, I think I'm right. That day God magnified
him. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's before the crossing of the Jordan.
Yeah. Right? And you bring up a really good point, Bryan. And that is that God told Moses before he was officially done that you're done. Okay. Yep. Moses, you will not go beyond this. You are done. But here's Joshua, encourage him. So that's the Deuteronomy 1 passage. So once you know what your shelf life is, what your expiration date is, then you have a new priority. And your new priority is to encourage your replacement. Now, you should always be encouraging your potential replacement in ministry, but we don't know if we're going to live tomorrow. But the point is, with Moses, he knew I am now done. God has told me I'm done. Yeah. And rather than be discouraged that I'm not going to see the promised land, I need to be encouraged by the fact that God has a ministry that's transcendent of my personality and even my lifetime. So I'm going to get busy investing in him.
100%. There's 2 things that stand out from what you just said. One is you may not know the exact, none of us, of course. Moses, you're going to die. You're not going to go in. There wasn't an exact timeline, but we can all by, the first thing that comes to my mind is we can all by just logic and just reality know what our shelf life is roughly. I mean, again, we could, I look at it like this. I've been really tending to my health this year. I've kept you in the loop on this, and I'm adding years to my life by doing this. But even if I'm healthy but God could still take me out with cancer. I could get in a car accident on the way home from the office today. But if none of that happens, I still maybe don't know the death day. But I mean, I'm not going to live naturally much past 80. Here I am. I'm 46. You're a little bit older than me. I mean, you at least know that much. And then if you back that up to strength and vigor for that task, or even in your case, maybe other things that you want to prioritize in this fourth-ish quarter, I guess.
Yep. Yep.
Um, so it's not like you don't have to die or have a death sentence to know that this is coming. First of all, and the second thing that stuck out to me about Joshua, and this is for young guys that are listening to this, Joshua's preparation was longer than his service. Now, it may not always be that. It may not be that your pastorate is shorter than your preparation time, but the principle is you should be set to both be trained, and those of us that are leaders should be set to train intentionally and seriously for a good space of time, preparing what would be obvious. I've said it like this with ordination in our church. When I ordain somebody, whether it's going to be my replacement one day or just us sending guys, I said, when I ordain somebody, the whole church is going to go, oh yeah, obviously.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, for
Right.
sure. I mean, this
Right.
guy was definitely, I mean, he's been involved in ABCD, or in Josh's case at your church, who
Yep.
was the most, I mean, what's obvious here is that Josh Venable would be the next pastor
Yeah.
of faith.
Yeah. Behavior ought to precede title always.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. It always. So you think about the ministry of Jesus, especially his Galilean ministry, which was the major share of his ministry. So in my understanding of the life of Christ, there were 3 separate Galilean campaigns. It seems as if Jesus conducted the first one himself. The second one he conducted with them attending and helping. But then the third one, he sent them. And what a great model.
Yeah. The pattern follows with Paul. Paul, how long was he trained, whether it was in the Arabian desert by these other disciples, Barnabas?
Yep.
You can't miss this replication succession plan.
That's right.
So let's shift it. Let's talk about some practical related things. First of all, why do you see sometimes this? Because I think people have started these and they haven't worked out. You may be aware, one that didn't feel like one thing comes to mind. I'll see if maybe another thing comes to mind. One way a pastoral succession can fail, or that I've seen, is that, there's maybe not a clear-cut timeline, and then the pastor maybe gets like a second wind.
Yep.
He
hires the guy to come in to be the guy. And when he hires the guy to come in to be the guy, all of a sudden, all of this pressure is off of the pastor. It's like, oh, I can do this. So, and that's unfair. So I would say, in this succession plan, and there's some of you guys that are listening right now that you're maybe there, or you're thinking toward that. What I would say is this: you've got to check your ego at the door, and you've got to swear to your own hurt. So for me, it's like I had to put a date on this. Why? Because I know myself, and I know myself. I know if I don't put a date on it, then July becomes August, and August becomes, and 2026 becomes 2027. And there's the best of intentions, but no, you really need to kind of get some hard edges on that thing. And that's why ahead of, praying, being sure that, God is in this, giving hope to the person to whom God is going to use in that next phase. That's so important.
So I want to look at this let's look at it 2 ways. First of all, let's look to the pastors out there, the older pastors, the guys that are your age or maybe older. Maybe they haven't thought much about this. Can you give just a piece of advice or two to them? Maybe some practical stuff about looking for the guy. What do they think? How should they be thinking about this?
Well, I would just take one step back and say to the younger guys, understand that your longevity has a shelf life. So plan now for your retirement so that you're not forced when you're 60 and 65 to make a decision that's based upon finances alone. Because what I hear time and again is guys stay in the ministry because what else am I going to do? And I can't afford not to be in the ministry. But when your rationale for staying in ministry is I need a paycheck, that's bad news. So I would say to young guys right now, talk to my son, Nate, or talk to your own financial advisor, but find a way to get that plan in place so that you're free You're free. You're not in bondage. You're free to do what God tells you to do when that time comes.
Yeah,
So I see
let me
that.
say another quick word about that because you wouldn't plug as hard as I can or would about Nate. Listen, man, I love Nate. Nate's been an incredible help to me personally. Nate has a passion for pastors and finance, incredible wisdom and resource. He's coming to our church in May to do a weekend with us. He is my personal financial advisor. He gave incredible help and wisdom as it relates to me as a guy who ignorantly opted out of Social Security and the whole, but fortunately I've been able to work quarters outside of church. So
Yep, yep.
I'm good. But the little things like that he has an expertise in. Then secondly, I would say our church is also piloting MoneyWise.
Mm.
This
Ours as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it starts in ours. Our quarter kind of starts in February for different reasons. But anyways, it's coming. So y'all got to check that out. I think that is one of the more crippling things. And you're right. If you're in your 60s, early 60s, you're really behind the eight ball thinking about this. If you're my age now in your 40s, you're a little bit behind, but you can get there.
Yep.
Start making the preparations now. Another thing, since you went to the younger guys, something I'm doing. I'm 46, Kurt. I've told my men at least that I'm kind of on your trend. Is kind of where I'm going. I'm, you're in your late 50s. Am I right? Is it?
50, I'm 58.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I've told them that I would like to be in process of turning over the church to my successor by the time I'm 60. And I've got other
It's a
things.
biblical pattern, Bryan. I mean, when you look at the Levite didn't really begin ministry until he was 30. And I feel like if you're in your 20s and you're listening to this podcast right now, don't despise what God's doing in your life. God is going to use all kinds of weird preparations in your life right now. You're wondering, why am I teaching at this Christian school? Why do I have 3 side jobs? Why? Don't worry about it. God is using all of that as a potpourri to prepare you. He is. There's
Mm,
something magical about that age 30. And so often I can tell the story that right around the age of 30, guys kind of figure out, okay, this is what God wants me to do. This is where God wants me to go. Not always that exact age, but I tell you, it's uncanny to me how often it's right around that phase.
mm.
And then God puts you in that sweet spot, 30 to 50,
Oh,
and
yeah.
where you're just doing the work of the ministry.
Mm.
But very soon thereafter, you're thinking about transition. You're thinking in terms of mentorship. The victories that you're winning are not the victories that you're winning, but they're the victories that you're experiencing in and through the people that you're mentoring. And I totally agree with you that when you get to these upper years, and unfortunately, I'm going to say 58's upper years, I want to spend my life coaching young guys. I
Yeah.
want to spend my life being in churches on the weekend and saying, hey, can I offer a piece of advice here? Hey, have you thought about this?
Yeah.
We need a whole lot more of that.
Absolutely. And I think the more talk, the more preparation you give your people. Like I give them, I just did it last deacons meeting. I gave them a short list of guys. Now, guys, I'm planning on being here until I'm about 60. I got 15 years maybe,
Was
but
I on that list?
of course not, because you wouldn't do it.
I'm going to be dead. That's why.
I hope not, man. And then because I hope we could just go to Israel many more times together.
Come on.
But and we'll talk about that soon too. But I told him, okay, this is my plan of building somebody up, and I've already given him a name that I think, and if he hangs with me, I think this may be what could happen. But if I die suddenly, I'm already giving them a few names, guys. This is what you should do. I just think I always want to be preparing them, because this church is, what do they say? Every pastor's a pastor in transition, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
we all got to be thinking that way. And I think that's good. So let's shift to an older guy. Let's
Yep.
think about, okay, what do you think? The young guys need that patience. They need to just wait on their turn. They need to get connected, obviously, with a mentor type guy. If they're not there, they probably should be thinking that way in some way. But let's talk about these older guys. What should they be maybe looking for in a successor? How should they maybe be active toward that?
Well, I mean, again, I think God is blessed in a multiplicity of ways, but I'm a big fan of a new pastor coming from within.
Yes.
because he's going to understand the heartbeat of the church. He's beyond what we call the honeymoon period. And I'm sure as I say this, there's somebody out there watching. It's like, oh man, we need to throw out all the applications of people. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but I say as an ideal, to have somebody who's been nurtured with, understands the people. When David went to the battle at the Valley of Elah, he left his sheep with a keeper, and people, someone that knew the sheep, somebody that understood that the sheep's maybe the habits, and I think that's important. I think it's really important.
And relational capital in the other way.
Very
So,
good.
you got guy who's been in the trenches. He's been praying with them. He's discipled them. He's taught. He's preached multiple times. They already know the guy. I mean,
Yes.
it should be more organic. Really, is what happens. So maybe a smaller church guy, if you don't have the luxury to have an assistant, maybe an idea would be maybe you start regularly having a young man in to preach some.
That's a really good piece of advice. Yeah, where this person is not an unknown entity to the
Mhm.
church.
Mhm.
He's a and it's interesting you say that, Bryan, because that's exactly what happened to me when I took Harvest. And Harvest, they voted me in 42-2. I've been looking for those two people ever since. But 42-2 back in 1996. But I'll tell you what, I was not an unknown entity to that church. The pastor, who was a dear friend of mine, had had me come in on numerous occasions, so that when I came in, it wasn't like we had to figure out who this guy is or he's preaching his sugar stick message. No, they knew me and I knew them. And that answers so many questions that should be, and maybe think about it. When you marry somebody, typically you marry somebody that you've dated for a while. You know something about them. It's not like, okay, we're going to have a candidating weekend. Okay, will you marry me? Yeah, that usually does ends badly.
That's right. Yeah, it's an interesting point. So I was talking to my deacons. This was this last meeting like 2 weeks ago, and I gave them my names that I always do, and one or two are here, and then the other two. One, my chairman, who's a great guy, military guy. I've been here for years. One of our just best men. He said he caught me afterwards. Hey, Pastor, I really don't know these other guys. Would you make an effort over the next year or two to bring them in for something? And
Really good.
I said, Randy, that's gold. I will,
Really good.
100%. And not only will I bring them in, we'll go out to dinner, and I might say, hey, can you train our leadership, on a Sunday afternoon, and they won't know
That's an
it.
important point, Bryan, that the church needs to see these people in pastoral roles, not
Mhm.
just in preacher roles.
Right.
Because anybody that's worth his weight can get up and preach a good message. That's a relatively small part of the ministry.
Of course,
But to put them in
especially when
settings
you're
where,
in
yeah,
town for the weekend. Like I just preached in California last weekend. I mean, quite transparently, I did not preach one brand new message. You
right,
know what I'm
right.
saying? And that's not because I'm not willing to do fresh bread. You know what I mean? We all do this all the time. I have a job. My main job is to be the pastor of this church, and I cook fresh meals twice a week. They're
Yep,
all new.
yep,
Every once in a while on the road, God will impress something on my heart that I need to write fresh for that moment.
yep,
But one of the attitudes I've got is like, hey, man, if it was good for my church, it's going to be good for them. And if I'm preaching in Genesis, which I am right now, the Genesis sermon is going to work. Find the one the last couple of weeks that really kind of, really hit home and take it on the
yep,
road or whatever.
yep.
So that you're right. So a guy comes in, who's coming in to my church? Like when you come in, you're going to be here for my 10th anniversary, the year you retire, actually from Faith. I'm super excited about that. I'm not like expecting you to, not preach something that you've already preached. It's so easy
Sure.
on the road in some regard. So yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, let's just think about like, okay, any final word of just encouragement about this subject, whether it's to the young person, the old person, or maybe even something that you're maybe specifically looking for in that younger guy. Maybe some
Yeah.
things about Josh, maybe some things about Josh specifically that really captured your heart through prayer and through thinking about him, that you're like, man, he's deeper than just a good preacher or whatever.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, does this man have a genuine walk with God? And here's a really good question. Could this man be my pastor?
Oh, that's good.
So if you're looking at somebody to pastor your church, pastors, if you're watching or listening to this right now, then you need to ask yourself the question, could this man be my pastor? And if
Mm,
the answer is no, then why would you downgrade for your church then? If he
mm,
couldn't be your pastor,
mm,
then he probably shouldn't be. That's one of the first things I said to Josh in this process. I said, Josh, you could be my pastor. So I feel like that's important. Does he have a genuine walk with God? Does he have a genuine love for people? He doesn't have to be like you. You know, that don't get into this game of he has to have the same personality as, the Lord is sovereign over his church, and he's the one that puts people in and takes people out. He knows the gift mixes. Sometimes you have to navigate, okay, well, if you have this temperament, and we've done all the tests here. We've done the Myers-Briggs, we've done the spiritual gifts tests, we've done the working genius model, which is really, really helpful. I would recommend that to anybody. And then it's really understanding who you are, what your leadership style is, how you hire to your weakness. What gap will the outgoing pastor create that can't
mm,
entirely be filled? So an incoming pastor is not going to entirely fill the gap that an outgoing pastor creates, but he's also going to provide more than what the outgoing pastor provided. So it's really recognizing what's on the table right now,
mm.
what gaps need to be filled, and how can I hire to those vacancies.
Mm. That's so gold. I'm going to say a couple words to the younger guys, and if there's something that you think you want to fill in, we'll let
Sure.
that be the final word here. When I think of the younger guys looking at this situation, my words of caution would be a couple. Number one, just don't be ambitious where you are. I mean, if the Lord is going to open the door, He's going to open the door. You don't have to push your way in.
Right.
Number two, I would say, as someone myself who's worked through some church transitions, some things that are different now at my church, be very careful to think I'm going to walk into an established church and make changes where things are really relatively smooth. The only situation where that really works is in a church that's literally about to flatline.
Right.
And so you have to know. In Josh's case, I would say Josh Surley is very comfortable with the way faith is, the way faith operates, and is not feeling like I've got to, jump on a different horse here to ride
Right.
off in the sunset. And
Right.
I'm for transition. I'm for change. I like change. I like to do things that I feel like need to be done in the church. But be very careful to sit in the shadow and think that I'm gonna jump on the lead horse and I'm gonna change things without uh, first of all, without risking your integrity, if that wasn't what you signed up for. And number two, risking real damage to the church
Correct.
by not doing. So you just got to be. If you're not comfortable with that, then don't take that path. And then number three, I would just say, if you're not ready in that cycle, and the time ever comes where you could look towards a person who's suggesting this, you really need to look for a mentor. You need to look for a guy who's going to really help you, and asking those questions and having some assurance that you're going to be able to get up in his wing and allow him to pour into you and know that that can happen is a critical piece. Any final word on the younger
Yeah.
guys looking
Yeah.
in?
No, that is so good. I mean, everything you just said is so good. Don't find your identity in a title. Be careful. And that goes to the younger guy and that goes to the older guy. And one of the reasons why older guys struggle letting go is because they've wrapped their whole Christ identity in church instead of in Christ.
Mm,
So I would say that for sure. And then I would say this, humility goes a long way. And people, humility is a magnet. And if you're humble going out and humble coming in, boy, there's something about that. Saul, God honored him. He had great potential. God honored him in that first year of humility. And then when pride got in, he became a toxic leader. So, but really just understanding the need for faith and humility, biblical identity. And then I would just say very practically to the younger guy, honor your legacy. You're not going to do everything the same, and you shouldn't. But honor your legacy. I'm so glad that our founding pastor is a member of our church. I love him. I owe
mm,
him a debt. I use every opportunity I can to talk about the investment he's made. And obviously, it's the Lord's church. The Lord uses people, but we want to give honor to whom honor is due, and that's important as well.
Amen. Kurt, thanks, man. Thanks for joining us, man. It's
Loved it.
so good to see you. It's always good to be with you. And next time we're together, we're going to talk a little bit about Israel. So you guys stay
Cannot
tuned.
wait. Yeah, it'll be awesome.
We're going to talk about the importance of a trip to Israel, and I am going to be the biggest supporter of that. God bless you guys. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you next time on Church Advance Podcast.